Ah, ah, I'm pushing. Ah, it hurts.
The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital in Lagos flickered as Adanna pushed through the final moments of labor. Outside, the Nigerian sun blazed mercilessly, but inside the delivery room, time seemed to freeze. Her husband, Chidi, gripped her hand so tightly that his knuckles turned white, whispering prayers in Igbo that his grandmother had taught him as a child. "One more push, Mrs. Okafor," Dr. Ebra urged, her voice cutting through the haze of pain. Adanna screamed, a primal sound that seemed to shake the very walls of the room. Then suddenly, there was another sound, the sharp, healthy cry of a newborn baby. Her daughter. Perfect. Whole. Beautiful. "She's perfect," the nurse announced, holding up the squirming infant wrapped in a pink hospital blanket. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and quite the pair of lungs. Tears streamed down Adanna's face as they placed her daughter on her chest. The baby's eyes were wide open, alert, her tiny fists waving in the air as if reaching for something only she could see. Adanna had never believed in love at first sight until that moment. This was her miracle, her blessing after 3 miscarriages and 5 years of waiting. "She has your eyes," Chidi whispered, kissing his wife's forehead. "What should we name her?" "Chioma," Adanna breathed. "God is good." The nurse took the baby to perform the standard newborn checks while Dr. Ebra attended to Adanna. "We'll keep you both overnight for observation," the doctor said, "but everything looks excellent." "You did wonderfully, Mrs. Okafor." Exhaustion pulled at Adanna like a tide. The adrenaline that had sustained her through 18 hours of labor was draining away, leaving her limbs heavy and her eyelids heavier. Chidi had gone to call their families with the good news, and the nurse had taken Chioma to the nursery for her first bath and additional tests. "Rest now," a different nurse said, one Adanna didn't recognize. She had kind eyes and spoke with a thick accent that suggested she was from the eastern region. "Your baby is in good hands. Sleep while you can. You won't get much once you take her home." Adanna managed a weak smile before sleep claimed her completely. She woke to the sound of her hospital room door opening. Disoriented, she blinked against the afternoon light streaming through the window. How long had she been asleep? "Mrs. Okafor, I've brought your daughter for feeding," a nurse said cheerfully, wheeling a bassinet into the room. Adanna's heart leaped. She struggled to sit up, ignoring the pain that still radiated through her body. But when the nurse lifted the baby from the bassinet, Adanna's smile froze on her face. The infant in the nurse's arms was crying, a weak, mewling sound that bore no resemblance to Chioma's robust wail. And there was something else, something that made Adanna's blood run cold. "This isn't my baby," Adanna said, her voice barely above a whisper. The nurse laughed nervously. "Of course it is, Mrs. Okafor. You're just tired. First-time mothers sometimes." "This is not my baby." Adanna's voice rose to a shriek that brought 2 other nurses running. "Where is Chioma? Where is my daughter?" The nurse holding the infant looked stricken. "Mrs. Okafor, please calm down. This is your daughter. See, here's the ID bracelet." But Adanna wasn't looking at the bracelet. She was looking at the baby's face, at the way its left arm seemed to hang limply, at the unfocused eyes that didn't track movement the way Chioma's had. This baby was sick. This baby was disabled. This baby was not hers. "Get Dr. Ebra," Adanna demanded, her voice shaking. "Get her now." The next hour passed in a blur of arguments, accusations, and tears. Dr. Ebra arrived, her professional calm barely concealing her concern. The hospital administrator was called. Security appeared. But no matter how many people Adanna told, no matter how much she screamed and cried, the answer was always the same. "According to our records, this is your baby, Mrs. Okafor. The ID bracelet matches. There's been no mix-up." "Then your records are wrong." Adanna sobbed. "My baby was perfect. She had all her fingers, all her toes. She was healthy and strong. This baby," she gestured at the infant now lying in the bassinet, "this baby is not mine." Chidi had returned by then, summoned by a frantic call from the hospital. He stood in the corner, his face a mask of confusion and growing horror. "Adanna," he said carefully, "maybe in the stress of labor, you didn't notice." "Don't you dare," Adanna hissed. I held her. I looked into her eyes. "I know my own child." But as the hours wore on and the hospital staff remained adamant, Adanna felt her certainty being eroded by doubt. Had she been so exhausted that she'd imagined her perfect baby? Had the pain and medication clouded her judgment? Every doctor, every nurse, every administrator insisted that this was her child. The baby, they kept calling it Chioma, though Adanna refused to use the name, had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy. The doctors explained it carefully clinically. Brain damage, possibly from oxygen deprivation during delivery. Motor function impairment. Developmental delays. A lifetime of challenges ahead. "These things happen," Dr. Ebra said gently. "Sometimes there are complications we can't predict. But with therapy and support." Adanna stopped listening. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together what had happened during those hours she'd been asleep. Who had been in her room? Who had access to the nursery? And most importantly, where was her real daughter? They released her the next evening with the disabled baby in her arms. Chitty drove them home in silence, his jaw clenched so tight that Adanna could see the muscle twitching. Their families had been told to stay away for a few days to give them time to adjust. Adjust to what? Adanna thought bitterly. A nightmare? The house looked exactly as they'd left it the day before. Baby clothes folded neatly in drawers, a new crib assembled in the corner of their bedroom, toys and bottles and diapers waiting for a child who would never use them. At least, not the child they were meant for. Adanna laid the baby in the crib and stepped back, her arms folded across her chest. The infant whimpered, its left arm twitching uselessly. She felt nothing. No maternal warmth, no protective instinct. Just a cold, hollow rage growing in her chest. "I'm going to find out what happened," she said aloud, not caring if Chitty heard her or not. "I'm going to find my real daughter. And whoever did this is going to pay." Adanna didn't sleep that first night. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Chioma's perfect face, heard that strong, healthy cry. And every time she opened them, she saw the disabled infant in the crib, a constant, taunting reminder of what had been stolen from her. At 3 a.m., while Chitty snored fitfully on the couch, he'd refused to share their bed, his way of showing silent solidarity with her suspicions. Adanna opened her laptop. The glow from the screen cast eerie shadows across her face as she typed. "Baby switched at hospital Nigeria." The search results made her stomach turn. Article after article, story after story. It happened more often than she'd ever imagined. Babies switched accidentally. Babies switched deliberately. Babies stolen and sold. In 2019, a hospital in Port Harcourt. In 2021, a clinic in Abuja. The pattern was always the same: overwhelmed staff, inadequate security, desperate women who would pay anything for a healthy child, or women who wanted to hide the shame of having given birth to one that wasn't. Adanna's fingers trembled as she created a new document and began typing everything she remembered. The nurse with the kind eyes who'd told her to rest. The unfamiliar face. Had Adanna seen her during the delivery? She couldn't remember. The hours she'd been asleep, vulnerable, trusting. She went through her phone, pulling up the photos Chitty had taken in the delivery room. There, Chioma's face, red and scrunched but unmistakably perfect. Adanna zoomed in on every detail: the shape of her ears, the arch of her eyebrows, the way her lips formed a tiny bow. She saved the photos to a separate folder, her evidence. Then she photographed the baby in the crib. Even asleep, the differences were stark. This child's features were softer, less defined. The left side of her face had a slight droop that Chioma hadn't had. And those eyes, when they were open, they had a glazed quality that spoke of neurological damage. "What are you doing?" Adanna jumped. Chitty stood in the doorway, his shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "Research," she said simply, turning the laptop so he could see the screen. "Look at these cases, Chitty. This happens. It's real." He rubbed his face with both hands. "Adanna, please. The doctors said. The doctors are wrong. Or lying. Or both. She stood up, her exhaustion forgotten in the rush of purpose. I'm going back to that hospital tomorrow. I'm going to demand to see their records, their security footage, everything. They won't let you. Then I'll make them. Her voice was steel. This is our daughter we're talking about. Our real daughter. Don't you want to find her? Something flickered across Chitty's face. Doubt, hope, fear. What if you're wrong, he whispered. What if this is our daughter and what if something happened during the birth? Then I'll accept it, Adanna lied. But I need to be sure. Can you understand that? He nodded slowly, though she could see he didn't really understand. How could he? He hadn't held Chioma for those precious few minutes. He hadn't looked into her alert, aware eyes. He'd been on the phone, calling relatives, while their world had been turned upside down. The next morning, Adanna left the baby with her mother-in-law, who'd come despite being asked to stay away, unable to resist meeting her first grandchild. The older woman had wept at the sight of the disabled infant, had pulled Adanna aside to whisper about traditional healers who might help. Adanna had nodded numbly and left. St. Mary's Hospital looked different in the harsh morning light. Less like a place of miracles and more like a prison. Adanna marched straight to the administrator's office, her demands typed out on her phone so she wouldn't forget anything in her anger. Mrs. Okafor, the administrator, a thin man named Mr. Adelik, greeted her with practiced sympathy. I understand you're upset, but I want to see the security footage from the nursery, Adanna interrupted. From 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. on the day I gave birth. Mr. Adelik's expression flickered, just for a moment, but Adanna caught it. Discomfort. Maybe even guilt. I'm afraid that's not possible, he said smoothly. Patient privacy regulations. I'm the patient. Adanna slammed her hand on his desk. And that's my baby in your footage. I have every right. Actually, you don't. His voice was firmer now. Hospital security footage is not available to patients under any circumstances. If you believe a crime has been committed, you're welcome to file a police report. Adanna stared at him. You're covering something up. I most certainly am not. Mrs. Okafor, I sympathize with what you're going through. Postpartum depression can cause. Don't you dare. Adanna's voice was dangerously quiet. Don't you dare tell me this is in my head. I know what I saw. I know my own child. She left before he could call security, but not before she saw the relief on his face. He wanted her gone. Why? What was he hiding? Outside the hospital, Adanna sat in her car and screamed. She screamed until her throat was raw, until her voice gave out completely. Then she pulled out her phone and did what she should have done from the beginning. She called the police. Detective Okonkwo was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. She listened to Adanna's story without interruption, taking notes in a small leather-bound notebook that she produced from her purse. And you're certain the baby you gave birth to was healthy? The detective asked when Adanna finished. Completely certain. The nurse said so. Dr. Ebra said so. My husband saw her. Adanna pulled out her phone, showing the detective the delivery room photos. Look at her. Does she look like a baby with cerebral palsy? Detective Okonkwo studied the photos carefully. These symptoms don't always present immediately, she said carefully. But I agree something about this feels off. She looked up at Adanna. I'm going to be honest with you, Mrs. Okafor. These cases are difficult to prove. The hospital will claim their records are accurate, without concrete evidence. Then help me find concrete evidence, Adanna pleaded. Please. I can't do this alone. The detective was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'll look into it. But Mrs. Okafor, I need you to prepare yourself for the possibility that you might not like what we find. What do you mean? Sometimes in these baby switch cases, both mothers are victims. Sometimes, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes one mother is complicit. The implication hit Adanna like a physical blow. Someone had wanted a healthy baby so badly that they'd stolen hers. Someone had been willing to give up their disabled child to take Chioma. Find her, Adanna whispered. Please. Find my daughter. Over the next week, Detective Okonkwo worked quietly but thoroughly. She interviewed hospital staff, reviewed birth records, and submitted official requests for the security footage that Mr. Adelik had refused to provide to Adanna. And slowly, a picture began to emerge. There had been 3 babies born at St. Mary's that day. One was Chioma, or the baby the hospital claimed was Chioma. The other 2 were both boys. But there had been a 4th woman in the maternity ward, a woman who'd been admitted in the early hours of the morning with complications. A woman who'd left the hospital without a baby. Her name is Ngozi Ease. Detective Okonkwo told Adanna over coffee at a small cafe far from prying ears. 38 years old, married to a wealthy businessman. This was her 5th pregnancy. The first 4 all ended in miscarriage. Adanna's hands tightened around her cup. What happened to her baby? According to the hospital records, the baby was stillborn. Died during delivery due to the umbilical cord being wrapped around her neck. Detective Okonkwo paused. A baby girl. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You think she took Chioma? I think it's a possibility worth exploring. Mrs. Ease left the hospital the same day you did, and she left in a hurry. Refused all the standard post-delivery care, refused to hold or see her dead baby, insisted on leaving immediately. The detective pulled out her phone, showing Adanna a photo. And this is interesting. She was seen in the hospital corridor near the nursery around 4 p.m. on the day you gave birth. One of the nurses remembered because Mrs. Ease wasn't supposed to be out of bed. Adanna stared at the photo. Ngozi Ease was beautiful, tall and elegant with expensive jewelry and designer clothes even in the hospital. The kind of woman who was used to getting what she wanted. But how would she have switched the babies? Adanna asked. The nursery has security, ID bracelets. Money, Detective Okonkwo said simply. Money can buy access, cooperation, silence. Mrs. Ease's husband is worth millions. If she wanted something badly enough, she could afford to make it happen. So, what do? The detective's smile was predatory. We set a trap. The plan was simple in theory, complicated in execution. Detective Okonkwo would approach Ngozi Ease officially, claiming to investigate discrepancies in hospital records from the day of Chioma's birth. Meanwhile, Adanna would do something far more dangerous. She would approach Ngozi herself, mother to mother, and see what truth might shake loose. This is risky, the detective warned. If she's guilty and realizes you're onto her, she could run. Or worse, she could do something to the baby. She won't hurt her own child. Adanna said with certainty she didn't quite feel. If she went through all this to get a healthy baby, she won't risk losing her. Unless she realizes the baby isn't legally hers, Chitty interjected. He'd been quiet during the meeting with Detective Okonkwo, but his fear was palpable. Adanna, maybe we should just let the police handle this. And wait how long? Weeks? Months? Adanna shook her head. Every day that passes, she bonds more with my daughter. Every day that passes, Chioma thinks that woman is her mother. I can't wait. So 2 days later, Adanna found herself standing outside an enormous mansion in the exclusive Ikoyi neighborhood of Lagos. The house was 3 stories of gleaming white stone, with a circular driveway and fountains that probably cost more than Adanna's entire house. A security guard eyed her suspiciously from the gatehouse. I'm here to see Mrs. Ease, Adanna said, her voice steadier than she felt. Tell her it's about the baby. The guard's expression didn't change, but he picked up a phone. A brief conversation in Yoruba followed, and then the massive gates swung open. Mrs. Ease will see you in the garden, the guard said. Adanna's heart pounded as she walked up the long driveway. What would she say? How would she know if Ngozi was guilty? And most importantly, would Chioma be there? The garden was as excessive as the house. Manicured hedges, imported flowers, a pool that sparkled in the afternoon sun. And sitting on a wrought iron bench beneath a flowering jacaranda tree was Ngozi Ease. She was even more beautiful in person, her skin flawless, her hair perfectly styled. But it was what she held in her arms that made Adanna's breath catch in her throat. A baby. A healthy, alert baby with wide eyes and waving fists.
Chioma.
Mrs. Okafor, Ngozi said, her voice melodious and cultured. I wondered when you would come. Adanna couldn't speak. She couldn't take her eyes off the baby, her baby. Chioma had grown in the past week, had filled out, looked even more beautiful than Adanna remembered. And she was wearing an outfit that probably cost more than Adanna's wedding dress. How did you know I would come? Adanna finally managed. Ngozi smiled, and there was something terrible in that smile. Because I would have. If someone had taken my child, I would burn down the world to get her back. Then you admit it. Adanna's voice shook. You admit you took her. I admit nothing. Ngozi stood, cradling Chioma against her chest. But I will tell you a story, Mrs. Okafor. A story about a woman who wanted a child more than anything in the world. A woman who prayed and suffered and lost, again and again. A woman who was told by doctors that her body was killing her babies, that she would never carry a child to term. She began to walk slowly around the garden, and Adanna followed, unable to look away from Chioma. This woman, Ngozi continued, finally got pregnant again. And for 9 months, she did everything right. She ate perfectly, exercised carefully, took every vitamin, followed every rule. But in the end, it didn't matter. Her body betrayed her again. Her baby was born dead. I'm sorry, Adanna whispered, and despite everything, she meant it. But that doesn't give you the right. Right? Ngozi laughed, a brittle sound. You speak to me of rights? You, who conceived easily, who carried your pregnancy without complication, who pushed out a perfect, healthy baby without even trying? You know nothing of what I've endured. So you stole my child to replace yours? Ngozi stopped walking. For a long moment, she just looked at Adanna, her eyes unreadable. Then she said, I didn't steal her. I saved her. Saved her from what? From you. Ngozi's voice was cold now. From a life of poverty and struggle. From parents who could barely afford the hospital bill, let alone the private schools and tutors and opportunities that I can provide. Look at her, Mrs. Okafor. Look at how healthy she is, how well cared for. Can you honestly say you could give her this? Adanna felt rage bubbling up from somewhere deep in her chest. She doesn't need wealth. She needs her mother. Her real mother. And what about the other baby? Ngozi asked softly. The one you left behind? She needs a mother too. A mother who can afford the therapies, the specialists, the care she'll require for the rest of her life. Can you provide that? The words were a gut punch. Adanna had been trying not to think about the disabled baby at home, the one she couldn't bring herself to love, the one who wasn't hers. But Ngozi was right about one thing. That child needed expensive care that Adanna and Chitty could never afford. You planned this, Adanna said, the pieces finally clicking into place. You found out I was having a girl. You knew your baby was sick. You arranged the switch before either of us gave birth. Ngozi's smile was answer enough. But how? The nurses, the security. Money, Ngozi said simply, echoing Detective Okonkwo's words. Money and desperation are a powerful combination. The nurse who attended both our births was drowning in gambling debts. The security guard who watches the nursery has a daughter who needs a kidney transplant. Everyone has a price, Mrs. Okafor. The question is, what's yours? Adanna stared at her. You think you can buy me off? I think I can offer you a solution that benefits everyone. Ngozi shifted Chioma to her other arm, and the baby gurgled happily. You take my daughter. She needs you more than this one does. I give you money, enough to care for her properly, enough to give her every chance at a good life despite her disability. And in return you walk away. You let me raise this child as my own. Never. The word was torn from Adanna's throat. I will never let you keep her. Then you condemn both children to suffering, Ngozi said calmly. Because I will fight you in court, and I will win. My husband's lawyers will bury you in paperwork. The hospital records all say this child is mine. The ID bracelets match. The nurses will swear I gave birth to her. What evidence do you have, Mrs. Okafor? A feeling? A mother's intuition. I have DNA, Adanna shot back. We can test both babies. The truth will come out. For the first time, Ngozi looked uncertain. DNA tests can be complicated, inconclusive, and expensive. Can you afford to wait months for results? Can you afford the legal fees when I challenge every test? I'll find a way. Will you? Ngozi stepped closer, and Adanna could smell her expensive perfume, could see the genuine desperation in her eyes. Or, will you be practical? Will you think about what's actually best for both these children instead of clinging to your pride? This isn't about pride, Adanna said, her voice breaking. This is about love. About the bond between a mother and child. Something you clearly know nothing about if you think it can be bought or sold. Ngozi's face hardened. Love doesn't pay for physical therapy. Love doesn't buy wheelchairs or medications or specialists. Love is a luxury, Mrs. Okafor. These children need more than love. They need their real mothers, Adanna insisted. And I'm taking my daughter home. Today. She reached for Chioma, but Ngozi stepped back, her arms tightening protectively around the baby. No, she said flatly. You're not. I'll call the police right now. Go ahead. Ngozi's confidence had returned. Tell them Mrs. Ngozi is caring for her own daughter in her own home. Show them the hospital records that prove this child is mine. Watch them laugh you out of the station. Adanna pulled out her phone with shaking hands. But before she could dial, a voice called out from the house. Ngozi, is everything all right? A man emerged from the mansion, tall, distinguished, in an expensive suit despite the heat. Ngozi's husband, Adanna, assumed. And from the way his eyes widened when he saw the baby, he clearly hadn't known about any switch. Emeka, Ngozi said, her voice suddenly nervous. This is Mrs. Okafor. She was just leaving. No, Adanna said, her eyes locked on Emeka's confused face. No, I wasn't. Your wife has something to tell you. Something about where she really got that baby. The color drained from Ngozi's face. Emeka, don't listen to her. She's confused, grief-stricken. I'm the mother of the child you're holding, Adanna said clearly. Your wife stole her from the hospital and replaced her with her disabled baby. A baby who is currently at my house, being cared for by my mother-in-law. Emeka looked from Adanna to Ngozi, his expression darkening. Ngozi? What is she talking about? It's not, I didn't. Ngozi's composure cracked. Emeka, please, just let me explain. But Adanna was already dialing Detective Okonkwo's number. As the phone rang, she watched Ngozi's carefully constructed world begin to crumble, and she felt no satisfaction. Only exhaustion, and a desperate hope that soon, very soon, she would hold her real daughter again. Detective Okonkwo arrived with 2 officers in less than 30 minutes. Adanna had expected Ngozi to run, to hide, to continue fighting. Instead, she sat on that garden bench cradling Chioma and wept silently while her husband paced back and forth, alternating between rage and disbelief. You switched our dead daughter for someone else's living child? Emeka's voice was hollow. Ngozi, how could you? How could I? Ngozi looked up at him, her tears genuine now. How could I bury another baby, Emeka? How could I live through another failure? I gave you 4 coffins. I couldn't give you a 5th. So you gave me a lie instead. The detective was professional, clinical as she took statements from everyone. The security guard who'd been paid to look the way. The GPS data from Ngozi's phone showing she'd been near the hospital nursery. And finally, Ngozi's own broken confession. I didn't plan it, she said, her voice barely audible. Not at first. But when my daughter was born dead, when I held her tiny body and knew I'd failed again. I was in the corridor, being wheeled back to my room, and I saw the nursery. Saw all those healthy babies. And I couldn't bear it. So you found a nurse willing to help you, Detective Okonkwo prompted. Ngozi nodded. Nurse Amara. She owed money to very dangerous people. I offered to pay her debts if she would help me. She told me there was a baby born that morning, a perfect, healthy girl whose mother was sleeping. She said it would be easy. A simple switch of ID bracelets. And my daughter? Adanna's voice cracked. You just took her? I held her, Ngozi whispered, looking down at Chioma. And she looked at me with these eyes, and I thought God was giving me a miracle. A second chance. I convinced myself that it was meant to be, that you would be better equipped to care for my disabled daughter than I would. That wasn't your choice to make, Detective Okonkwo said sharply. I know. Ngozi's tears fell onto Chioma's head. I know that now. But in that moment, grieving and desperate and half-mad with loss, I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. For everyone. The detective turned to Adanna. Mrs. Okafor, I'll need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. And we'll need to arrange DNA testing to confirm the identities of both children, though I don't think there's much doubt at this point. Adanna nodded, unable to take her eyes off Chioma, her daughter. So close, but still in another woman's arms. Mrs. Ease, Detective Okonkwo said firmly, I'm going to need you to hand over the baby. Ngozi's grip tightened, her face crumpling. Please, just let me hold her a little longer. Just a few more minutes. Ngozi. Emeka's voice was gentle despite his obvious anger. Let her go. I can't. Ngozi was sobbing openly now. I can't lose another baby, Emeka. I can't. She was never yours to lose. For a long, terrible moment, Adanna thought Ngozi might refuse. Might run or scream or do something desperate. But finally, with shaking hands, she held Chioma out to Adanna. Take care of her, Ngozi whispered. Please. She likes to be rocked to sleep. And she doesn't like loud noises. And her voice broke completely. She has your smile. Adanna took her daughter into her arms, and the world righted itself. Chioma's weight, her warmth, the way she immediately nuzzled into Adanna's chest as if she knew, as if she remembered. Adanna's tears fell into her daughter's hair as she held her close, breathing in her scent, feeling her heartbeat. I've got you, she whispered. Mama's got you now. The ride to the police station was a blur. Statements were given, paperwork was filed, and Detective Okonkwo explained that Ngozi would be charged with child abduction and bribery. Nurse Amara had already been arrested. The hospital was under investigation. It was everything Adanna had wanted. But when she finally arrived home with Chioma in her arms, she found Chidi sitting on the couch with the disabled baby, Ngozi's daughter, cradled against his chest. She was crying, he explained, his voice rough. I couldn't just let her cry. Adanna looked at the little girl, her left arm tucked awkwardly against her chest, her eyes tracking slowly as she tried to focus on Chidi's face. For the first time, Adanna saw her not as an imposter, but as another victim of her mother's desperation. What happens to her? Chidi asked. I don't know, Adanna admitted. Ngozi will probably go to prison. Her husband, I don't know if he'll want to raise her, knowing what Ngozi did. She might end up in foster care or an orphanage. They both looked at the baby. She was cooing now, a soft sound that tugged at something in Adanna's chest despite her best efforts to remain detached. Ngozi was right about one thing, Chidi said quietly. She needs expensive care. Therapy, specialists, equipment. Things her father could easily afford but might not want to provide. Not for a child that reminds him of his wife's betrayal. What are you saying? Chidi was quiet for a long moment. I'm saying that we're not rich, but we're not poor either. I'm saying that my uncle is a physical therapist who would help us. That your sister is a special education teacher. That this baby didn't ask to be born with disabilities, and she certainly didn't ask to be used as a pawn in her mother's desperate plan. Adanna shifted Chioma to her other arm. You want us to keep her? I want us to consider it. He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. Not as a replacement for Chioma. Never that. But maybe both these babies deserve a chance at a family who loves them, who chose them. You're insane, Adanna said, but her voice lacked conviction. She thought about Ngozi's desperation, about the lengths a person would go to for a child, about love and choice, and the sometimes terrible price of both. Maybe, Chidi agreed. But think about it. These two girls, they spent the first week of their lives together. In some strange way, they're connected now. And if we raise them together, they'd always know the truth. No secrets, no lies. Just an unconventional family. Adanna looked down at Chioma, who was falling asleep in her arms, perfect and peaceful. Then she looked at the other baby, who was watching Chitty with such trust and contentment despite everything she'd been through. "Let me think about it," she said finally. Over the next weeks, the legal proceedings dragged on. Ngozi was formally charged and released on bail thanks to her husband's money and lawyers. Emeka filed for divorce. The DNA tests confirmed what everyone already knew. Chioma was Adanna's biological daughter, and the disabled baby was Ngozi's. But something strange had happened during those weeks. Every time the social worker came to take Ngozi's daughter to temporary foster care, Adanna found herself hesitating. The baby had started to smile, lopsided and unpracticed, but genuine. She recognized Chitty's voice and would calm when he sang to her. And when Chioma cried, the other baby would make soft sounds as if trying to comfort her. They're bonded, the social worker observed during one visit. It happens sometimes with babies who spend their earliest days together. They develop a connection. One evening, Adanna sat in the nursery with both babies, Chioma in her crib, Ngozi's daughter in a bassinet they'd borrowed. She watched them sleep, these two little girls whose lives had been so violently entangled. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered to Chitty, who stood in the doorway. "I don't know if I can love her the way she deserves to be loved." "You don't have to know right now," he said gently. "You just have to be willing to try." The final court hearing was a media circus. Ngozi's lawyers argued for leniency. Their client had been temporarily insane with grief, had never intended to harm anyone, was seeking psychiatric treatment. Adanna was asked to give a victim impact statement. She stood at the podium, looking directly at Ngozi, who sat pale and thin in the defendant's chair. "What you did was unforgivable," Adanna began. "You stole my child. You violated my trust, my body, my life. You made me doubt my own mind, my own memories. You caused me pain that I'm not sure I'll ever fully recover from." Ngozi's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "But," Adanna continued, her voice softening slightly, "I also understand that you were drowning. That grief can make people do terrible things. That desperation can cloud judgment in ways that seem impossible until you're living it yourself." She paused, gathering her courage for what came next. "Your daughter is still in my care," she said. "The social workers have asked me repeatedly if I want her placed elsewhere. And I've been thinking about what you said in your garden, about love not being enough, about these babies needing more than good intentions." Ngozi was openly crying now. "You were wrong about a lot of things," Adanna said firmly. "But you were right about one. Your daughter needs extensive care that costs money I don't have. So I'm making you an offer. You plead guilty to all charges. You accept whatever sentence the court deems appropriate. And in return, you establish a trust fund for your daughter's care, therapy, equipment, education, everything she'll need for her entire life." "I don't understand," Ngozi whispered. "I'm keeping her," Adanna said clearly. "Both of them. Chioma and your daughter, who my husband and I have named Amara, after the second chance she represents. We're adopting her, raising her as a sister to Chioma. But we're doing it with your help, whether you're in prison or not." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Ngozi looked stunned. "Why?" she finally asked. "After everything I did to you, why would you do this?" Adanna thought about it, about all the sleepless nights and difficult decisions that had led her to this moment. "Because revenge is easy," she said, "and forgiveness is hard. But raising these two little girls to know that they're both loved, both chosen, both deserving of every opportunity, that's the hardest thing of all. And I think maybe that's exactly why it's the right thing." She looked at the judge. "But I want full custody. Legal adoption. Ngozi gives up all parental rights. She can fund Amara's care, but she doesn't get to interfere in how we raise her." The judge looked at Ngozi. "Do you agree to these terms?" Ngozi nodded, her face wet with tears. "Yes. Yes, I agree. And I thank you. Thank you for giving her what I couldn't." 3 months later, the adoption was finalized. Ngozi was sentenced to 2 years in prison with 3 years probation. The trust fund was established. And Adanna brought both babies home. Officially, legally, permanently. It wasn't easy. Amara's therapy appointments were exhausting. The looks from people who saw the two babies together and clearly wondered about their story were draining. And there were still nights when Adanna looked at Amara and felt that old flash of resentment, that reminder of what had been stolen. But there were other moments too. The first time Amara's therapy helped her grasp a toy with her affected hand, Chioma had clapped as if she understood the victory. The way both girls slept better when they were in the same room. How Chioma would cry if Amara was taken to a doctor's appointment without her. One evening, when both babies were asleep, Chitty found Adanna standing in the nursery doorway, watching them. "Do you regret it?" he asked softly. "Taking her in?" Adanna was quiet for a long moment. "Ask me again in 10 years, she finally said. When they're both in school, both asking questions about why they look nothing alike, both trying to understand how they became sisters. "And what will you tell them?" "The truth," Adanna said. "That sometimes families are born from love. And sometimes they're born from pain. But that doesn't make them any less real." She thought about Ngozi in her prison cell, about the nurse who'd facilitated the switch and was serving her own sentence, about all the people whose desperate choices had led to this moment. "I still don't forgive her," Adanna admitted. "Maybe I never will. But I'm trying to understand that hurt people, and that healing means breaking that cycle, even when it costs you everything you thought you knew about justice." Chitty put his arm around her shoulders. "You're a better person than I am." "No," Adanna said, watching both babies sleep peacefully. "I'm just a mother who refuses to let someone else's betrayal define my children's future. That's not nobility. That's survival." In the crib, Chioma stirred and reached out a tiny hand. In the bassinet, Amara's fingers twitched in response, as if even in sleep they were aware of each other. Two babies, bound by circumstance and choice, beginning a journey that neither of their mothers could have predicted. And Adanna, standing in the doorway watching them, made a silent promise. She would tell them their story when they were old enough to understand. She would never let them doubt that they were both chosen, both loved, both hers. But for tonight, she would let them sleep. Two sisters who didn't know yet how complicated their bond would be, how much strength they would need to navigate the truth of their beginning. Two babies who, despite everything, had found their way home.